Welcome to the Courage Over Cowardice podcast, where I cover topics and issues that will help you take a stand for Christ in culture. More than ever, followers of Jesus need courage to stand up, speak up, and to live out their faith, because people need to know that there's a God in heaven that loves them, and it is His truth that sets people free. Thanks for listening today, and I hope that you enjoyed the episode. Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Courage Over Cowardice podcast. It's my privilege to have joining me for this episode Amy Bohn. She's the co-founder and president of PERK, Protection of the Educational Rights of Kids. She is originally from Arkansas, has a degree in psychology and a background in life coaching, working with people from all walks of life. Her leadership has impacted people of all ages, and she's an activist leader in California, which we're going to talk about. A mutual friend, Rob McCoy, said you need to have her on the podcast, and so we talked a little bit. And Amy, welcome to the podcast. Excited to have you join us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So if you could just kind of introduce yourself and talk a little bit, just an overview of what you do and you're a part of, and then we'll kind of get into some of the specifics.
Yes. So I'm originally from Arkansas, like you said, and my husband is from California. So in 2018, we moved to the great state of California, and that's where we started PERK. And really, when we got here, we were surprised by how extreme it was in California with the policies and how they were really infringing on parental rights and children's rights. And that was just the beginnings of understanding that there's a fight here and that there's something, we need to do something about it. So we formed PERK in 2019, the summer of 2019, and our core mission is to protect the educational rights of children and to protect parental rights, and then also to preserve medical freedom. So as you have seen over the past several years, all of those categories are under attack in California and even across the country as well. But we've seen it be really aggressive here in the state. And so we're working really hard as a nonprofit to really get people involved in those, fundamental missions and the core mission of PERK. And we're making a huge impact because so many people are working together with us hand in hand to really create change and on these issues in California, where it's supposed to be, you can't do that here. You're not supposed to be able to do that in California, but yet we are. So we're really excited about the work we're doing here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit further about some of that work that you are doing. I know that you meet with legislators, lawyers, schools, school boards, superintendents, boards of supervisors, covering a variety of issues, particularly how they impact and affect children. I think this is really important because oftentimes those of us who do not live in California think like, whatever, it's the left coast, we expect the crazy pill there, and the jokes, it's the land of fruits and nuts and all those things, which is kind of funny, maybe unfair, but the leadership has a tendency definitely to be that. And I think it's unwise for us to discard what's happening in California, because I view much of the craziness that originates in California gets pushed then. You guys are kind of like the prototype, if you will, to then push that nationwide. And so I really appreciate your perspective, and I think it's important because so many people often say, like, we're going to talk about some issues, and so many people often say, well, that's not happening here. And the reality is I just say it probably is happening here. You're just not aware of it. And either way, it's coming here. And so what can we do about it? And so let's talk a little more specifically about some of the focuses that you guys have had, maybe some wins that you've had. And within that, we can be empowered with steps that we can take, and also some warnings of what's kind of coming to our doorstep, what's coming to our local school districts, what's coming and impacting our families. So why don't we start with some of the wins and successes that you're having right now in fighting the good fight there in California?
Yeah, thank you for saying what you said about California. I know, it is kind of funny that you described it as fruits and nuts, or that's how
the communist state of California
people might view California. But I wanted to reiterate very quickly that, and actually California is so critical to the entire country. And what you said is absolutely true, that yes, sometimes what's happening in California isn't happening in another state, but it's just a matter of when it will come to a state near you, because California
Mm-hmm.
is that space or place where they pilot a lot of these programs or test the grounds here before they bring it to a different state. Because if they can push these agendas and these issues and succeed in California, then the rest of the state is much easier. So California is definitely, I mean, honestly, I think California and New York are two of the most important states people need to always be watching and supporting work like the work PERK's doing, because it's so significant. And what's that saying about, how it goes in California, it'll go, throughout the rest of the country,
Yeah.
right? So, and
And
that
there's,
happens.
yeah. No, you're right. It's so true, and that's that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because you're kind of fighting in the future,
Mhm.
and some of us can get prepared for what's about to be a part of our world, and I think be equipped within that, because oftentimes. Believers will say, well, there's nothing I can do about that. I just need to pray. And all that's well and good. We do need to pray. But Jesus said, let the little children come to me, for such is the kingdom of heaven. It would be better for you to not be born or have a millstone, which is about a ton of weight, tied around your neck, you thrown into the sea, than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. And we know throughout Scripture that children are so vital and important to the Lord, and they are to us as well. Well, many in our nation, we know there's a battle for that, whether it's abortion, the transgender craze, school. There's so many different things within that. So let's talk about that for a few moments around some of these fights that you guys have been engaged with, maybe some wins that you've had, and then we'll kind of go down the rabbit trail of these topics.
Okay, so on that point, there's five main areas that really hold up our mission, and that's where the wins are. So one, we do work on legislation and legislative issues up at the Capitol. Two, we have lawsuits throughout the state of California, and we've had wins in that space as well, and I'll share some of those too. Three, we have advocacy, and that's where we're really engaging other people to take action. And then four is action. So anytime there's a problem, there's always going to be solutions that we can take and action around it. So we try to help teach people how to take action. And some of the
Mm-hmm.
results in that space are actually pretty phenomenal to show you how, I guess, really how passionate everybody is here to fight for children and to protect them. And then the last part is education. So we really believe that educating people about the issues, bringing awareness to it, making sure that people are informed with credible information and sources actually helps them to take action, to advocate for themselves, and to be part of this process that does create results. So, on that, I'll mention a couple of things. So, with our lawsuits, during the time of COVID, the schools and, of course, the state of California was, really locked down in a very extreme way. And
Yeah.
during that time, the state of California was trying to push the COVID shot on children, school aged children, and try to make it a mandate. So we had schools
Yeah.
like LAUSD, which is the second largest in the entire country, has 600,000 children in that school district. They were implementing a mandate for all children to get the COVID vaccine, and otherwise they'd be kicked out of school. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that was happening. Many school districts were trying to implement the COVID mandate on the kids. So what we did is we filed a lawsuit against LAUSD and against Piedmont School District. And the result, what in Piedmont, for example, the judge actually did side with us that it was illegal for the school district
Yeah.
to implement
Fantastic.
any kind of mandate on the kids, and he issued order to stay. In other words, the school could not do it, so they had to stop the mandate, and it preserved, of course, children from getting the shot, and also they weren't kicked out of school because of that lawsuit. So same thing with LAUSD. Our lawsuit was in litigation against the school district, and conveniently, right around a couple of our hearings in front of the judge, within 48 hours, the school district actually delayed their mandate. And what was significant about that and why this was so important for the kids is 35,000 children were on the verge of being kicked out of school and forced into independent study if they didn't take the COVID shot.
Wow.
And so that was just like, I mean, it was such a huge win. Honestly, we were standing in front of LAUSD's board, their board meeting, and there were hundreds of parents there when we got the news. We were in the rain with umbrellas, and it just shows you that rain or shine, people are so
Yeah.
dedicated to this, to protecting the children. And so while the lawsuit was holding the line, the other significant win in that is that 35,000 children had parents who understood that they didn't want to, force their child to take a shot that they didn't need or that could harm them. And they were holding strong as well. So that was
Yeah.
those were two huge, huge victories for children and for parental rights and for PERK. And then the other thing that happened too, another great win that we had just a few months ago, because we have almost 10 lawsuits. So we're very active in the space of litigation
Mm-hmm.
and holding those accountable that are really trampling on constitutional rights and the rights of the people.
Yeah.
So another lawsuit we had that we just had a victory with was we sued the city of San Diego. So just like across the country, the city of San Diego, other counties in California, they were issuing a mandate on all the first responders. And that mandate was either get the COVID shot or be terminated, basically. And so we decided that's not okay. We weren't okay with that. We teamed up with the firefighters and the police officers and the Police Officer Association in San Diego working together. We had vaccinated and unvaccinated fire captain, police captain, and they were some of the plaintiffs in our lawsuit. And we sued the city for this
Yeah.
unlawful mandate. And we were on the verge of going to trial in March of this past year. And in January, we got a phone call from the city's attorneys, and basically they agreed that they would drop the mandate, remove the mandate, and that's what happened. So it was a huge victory because there were hundreds of firefighters and police officers that were going to lose their job, which would have then
Mm-hmm.
made the city unsafe. So that was a huge result that protected that entire city with over 800,000 people that live there. So that was a great victory for the space of medical freedom.
Yeah.
So that was a really, really important one. And then we also, in the space of legislation, California, as we've already talked about, they put forward these very, very extreme laws. And it's not, one thing, Sam, I think that's important for people to understand, it doesn't necessarily reflect how the people really feel and what the people want. It's
Yeah. So true.
there's a group of extreme legislators that are putting forward policies and laws that do remove parental rights and do harm children and do harm people and try to force them, to force mandates on them. But they're not a representation of the people. And that's part of why I know that, everyday people are alongside us with the mission that PERK has. And last year is a great example of that, where there were 12 really, really horrific, honestly, bills that they were trying to introduce as laws. And it was essentially 1984 on steroids if these laws could have passed. And
Mm-hmm.
they would have removed, they would have made it so that the health department would have been able to force the sheriff department and law enforcement to implement their orders. And if they didn't, then the law enforcement would get their funding removed. They were laws like trying to mandate the entire state of California, from babies all the way up to adults in the workplace, that they would have had to get the COVID vaccine and show proof of it. Otherwise, they couldn't work or go to school. I mean, these were the kinds of laws they were introducing. And one of them in particular was called SB 866. And this would have allowed children at the age of 12 to consent to get any and all vaccines without their parents' knowledge or consent. So
Mm.
the issue in that is that these are minors, these are children. They're not capable yet to make fully informed decisions or give informed consent because they don't have fully developed brains. Those
Yeah.
3 children, and they're wonderful, but they're not. They can't make these types of big lifelong decisions yet until they're in their 20s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they were going to tried to remove that parental consent notification. And that particular bill, I'm telling you, there were so many organizations working hand in hand with PERK together, collaborating. And it took all of us working together in unity to fight back and to stop that bill. And we did. So the last day they could have gotten the bill passed, they couldn't pass it. And we won. So we won that battle for parental rights and for children.
Yeah.
And so there's
So good.
examples like this over and over again happening in California. I mean, I'll tell you too, this year, they've really, so last year was all about these COVID mandates. Honestly, that was a big push last year at the state capitol to try to force this on the people, and we won.
Hmm.
7 of those bills we stopped. They weren't able to pass them. Another organization filed a lawsuit and stopped, that from being implemented. So it's just amazing things happening to protect freedom here. And this year, the theme has sort of shifted from what we can see to really be more about the transgender issue and trying to force these ideas on children in ways that are also very extreme and very harmful. And so that's been kind of the theme of the legislative their attempts this year. And also in that space, we have been able to successfully have bills vetoed. And these are the kinds of bills, just so your audience knows, there was one bill that would force parents to affirm their children. And if they didn't affirm the child, then the parent could possibly lose custody of that child. So,
Yeah.
that
I talked about that in one of my messages
you did. Did you
not too long ago. Yeah.
so you saw that
Yeah.
one in California, and so
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So the reason why it didn't pass and it was vetoed is because, we teamed up with another organization called I Can Legislate, and we both have a C4, a 501c4, and we hired a
Hmm.
lobbyist. So we have a full-time lobbyist in Sacramento working full-time on these issues, the parental rights, to protect parental rights, protect children, protect medical freedom. And this was one of those bills where he, as our lobbyist, was very capable and competent and sharing the concerns of parents with legislators, and eventually that outcome that we wanted for the bill not to pass, it worked. So that was one. There was another bill. There were actually quite a few bills that were really just so damaging for children, because what they're doing, just kind of so people understand the landscape here, they try to pass these laws that have unintended consequences both in the school and in the home and just in general. And when you're targeting children and parental rights on this issue, it's like a brick. It's like a brick at a time that's building a house that is so harmful for the kids. So we actually had a meeting with Governor Newsom's staff just a couple of weeks ago to discuss all these unintended consequences and how harmful these bills were. So, when every time there's a win in California, it really is a big deal. And I just, the fact that there are wins is important, so people know we can do this. It is possible.
Absolutely.
California,
Yeah. Don't lose heart.
you don't lose heart. And sometimes we have to be very smart with how we're, taking action. So, I really try to encourage people that doing something is better than doing nothing, obviously, right? But when you have these issues, there are things people can do to make a difference. Sometimes it's just bringing information and education to others that this is happening. So I love hearing that you've talked about some of these bills in California with your congregation on your podcast, because that brings awareness to what's happening. So that's huge. And then the other thing we saw too, just so people have an idea of what kinds of things it can do, on all these bad bills that were presented this year, we created these action campaigns that were very targeted to talking points and to reach the legislators at why these bills were not good for parents or for children. And of that, in our advocacy tool, we basically draft a letter that's already pre-made for people. We've already kind of got the main points there, and all people have to do is just click submit, and we have it set up to send out to all the legislators or to their legislator. And to give you an idea of how much action was taken through this advocacy tool, we've hit over 1.3 million actions that were taken this year on these bills. So that's over a
Wow.
million emails, over 100,000 tweets were sent out to legislators. And I mean, that's a lot. Those are a lot of emails and a lot of tweets. But the idea is that people are taking action. So you can say something, you can do something, you can send a letter, and sure, maybe one letter doesn't have the same impact as over 100,000 or a million emails, but that's the point.
Hmm.
Is if everybody is doing something and contributing to the, I guess, the collective effort on this, then that's the type of impact we can have together. So that's, I mean,
Yeah.
some really big wins and results here in California.
I think it's awesome and hopefully encouraging to everybody listening that there are organizations, there are people that are in the public space, in the public square, that are making an impact, and hopefully it emboldens us because oftentimes we look at these issues and say, "Man, what can I do?" It seems so big, so overwhelming. And it is on many levels, but I think these issues are too important for us to just stand idly by and let go. And so, example, the scripture says, I had mentioned a little bit about kids and 1 Corinthians 6:19. Now, this is, the context of this is related to sexual immorality, but the principle of it is kind of biblical throughout. And it says, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, who you have received from God?" So we know that God created us, God created family, God established authority, He established parental rights. And too often I've found, just in talking with people, there's sayings that they sort of make sense and they sort of don't. So someone will say, "Well, it takes a village." And I always say, well, not if it's a godless village. Not if it's a godless village that's socially engineering your child and imputing Marxist ideas and all kind of craziness into their heart and their spirit. Like, that's not a village. It takes a family. And under the Lord, like, friends and everybody else, that's important. But I think the responsibility individually, before we get into this idea of collectivism, which is just, pseudo-communism, that we do have authority, we do have rights from God in leading our family. And two of the issues that you brought up, I think are really, they're really important. I want to talk about them for a few moments, and then some recommendations, what we can be involved. Essentially, we're talking about, bodily autonomy, freedom, medical freedom, and that has shown up in a big way in two issues. And one is related to, I hate just to say the vaccine, I would say, what would be the term? It's an experimental gene therapy that was foisted upon our culture. And everybody is told, you have to get this. We're like, hold on, what is the outcome of this? What is the impact of each of these issues? The secondary thing that we see that I think is a big red pill, if you would, for your average person is we're seeing the transgender craze, where when you say unintended consequences, I'm a little bit more of a skeptic. That's probably the way to approach with people. I'd say they're fully intended. It's social engineering, and it's a backdoor to control, and also to make a lot of money, whether it's through things that they're putting in their bodies, trying to put in our children's bodies, or things they're trying to take off of our children's bodies. It's very much tied to, a lot of things within that. That's anti-family, anti-God, anti-human. And so I don't want to scare people who have had maybe the experimental gene therapy. I have a number of people in my world that have had that. I'm glad they're okay. I know people that were not okay, that had serious medical issues right after. There's a lot of concerns. The majority of Americans are no longer getting the boosters. And so it's time for a new variant, right? So they're no longer getting the boosters and all those things. So I want to talk about that for a moment because you're very well read on this topic. We see it being it being brought now into the public discourse as we see RFK's candidacy, which I do not support for various reasons, but I do like what he's talking about related to vaccines and all those things, and having an honest debate and discussion around something that's really important. So what would you say? Someone says, hey, you're being extreme. I got the experimental gene therapy. I'm fine. The kids are fine. You're just a, right wing, crazy. The science says it says everything is fine. Let's just take a few moments and poke some holes in that, because I think those that are saying that are just scared to consider the alternative.
Yes, I mean, I have so many thoughts about about this. Okay, so you talked about two issues. So first, we're going to talk about the vaccine. Or I've looked at the research as well. So calling it a vaccine versus gene therapy. Gene therapy really is an accurate description of what how it was brought forward, mRNA technology. So to kind of go to that space first, I think I would start by saying that people have to, number one, with freedom, just the United States, our Constitution is built in a way that protects choice and preserves all of our, freedom of religion and the exercise of that, freedom of speech, all these things. And so to understand the COVID shot, people have to also understand that just the fundamental basic freedoms that we have and should be preserving were under attack during the COVID lockdown. So how and why does that matter related to information about the vaccine? And the reason it matters is because people that were trying to speak up about it and to give information to just the population, to the public, were being censored, deplatformed. So the information was being suppressed. So I think that is really important to mention, because the information we're going to talk about, we had to work hard in some ways to get that information. And so I don't blame people that are confused or misinformed about this, because they were purposefully misinformed by our country and our government, and to the tune of $10 billion of marketing dollars and marketing money were pushed out into all of the platforms to promote the shot. And if you understand
billboards,
exactly,
social media, TV, commercials, nonstop.
The promotion of it, including incentives like, hey, go get your COVID shot and you'll get a donut, or you can have your name put in the lottery, here in California, you can win this prize, or, tickets to the baseball game, or the
hamburger and French fries, like in New York, just ridiculous.
Yes, exactly. But I think people have to understand that when they're using those types of tactics, we have to critically think here. So yes, we can talk about side effects. There's a lot to say about the shot in general, but just take a moment and take a step back and look at the flow of money. So if you have billions of dollars that are coming through the marketing campaigns, they're trying to sell you something. So, and they're overselling it for a reason. And while they're doing that, they're simultaneously suppressing any differing opinion or differing voice or concern on the safety or the efficacy of that thing they're trying to sell you. So all the doctors that we know and work with at PERK, that are some of the best the best cardiologists, the best, lung doctor, just these phenomenal professionals who started to say there's something wrong here with the COVID shot. As soon as they started to speak about it, they were censored. So we have to think critically. Why are they censoring the best doctor in the world, the most published doctor in the entire country? Why are they censoring him? And if we can think about that for a minute, then maybe there's something that the government's hiding that they don't want the people to see, because they're promoting it through all this money. They're censoring the doctors that are telling us that there's concerns here and trying to get information out to the people. And then I think you also have to look at just something very foundational, which is that the pharmaceutical companies themselves have contracts with the government and with other countries to the tune of billions of dollars that
Mm-hmm.
where they've bought millions of doses of these shots for people. So there's all of these conflicts happening, just looking at it from a foundational perspective. And then those pharmaceutical companies themselves have a significant track record of criminal records and
Yeah.
and harming people, knowingly bringing, just think about this for a minute, knowingly bringing products to people that these pharmaceutical companies know will harm others. They have been accused of allegations of destroying documents and evidence and science that proves it will hurt people. They've withheld that information. They've been
Mm-hmm.
it's been proven in the courts of law to the tune of
Yeah.
billions
It's
of
a matter of record.
a
Yeah.
matter of record that there have been settlements on these issues for all these major pharmaceutical companies that were bringing forward the vaccine or the shot. So people have to think, if you have a track record and a history of that, these companies are not trustworthy. So they've already in the past manipulated information, manipulated the data so that it looked better than what it was and falsified it. So if we can just ask ourselves a question, why wouldn't they do that now with the COVID vaccine? Why is this time any different than what has already transpired up until now? And then you
Yeah.
add another element to that that's foundational, and that is all of these vaccine companies, all of these manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, they don't have any liability when it comes to harm with these products. So
Mm-hmm.
what people hopefully understand from that is, if you're harmed, you can't sue them. They have
Yeah.
no liability. There is no recourse directly with them. And this is one of the only products that I'm aware of where that's the case, where you can't sue the company who's bringing forward the product. So what motivation do they have to make the product safe or to make it truly effective or to tell the truth if there's no liability for any harm they've done? They have a track record of this criminal history. They have a track record of, falsifying the information already, which is the equivalent of fraud. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
that's fraudulent, but they're in bed with the governments and the countries to with these contracts for billions of dollars worth of the shots. So if people can understand that first, then I feel like that empowers people with these bits of education to now understand why we're seeing so many people injured by the COVID shot. I think
Mm-hmm.
up to date, there's this really great website called openvaers.com. I've used,
Mm-hmm.
you probably know that one as well.
Yeah. Yeah. OpenVaers, VAERS.com.
Yes.
OpenVaers. Mm-hmm.
Correct. So I looked up their numbers as of today, and they're tracking all of the COVID negative reactions, adverse reactions that people are having across the country, and they're at almost 1.6 million reports. So we know this is
Mm-hmm.
underreported, but just
Yes.
as of today, 1.6 million people have at least reported, or their doctor reported, adverse reactions to the COVID shot. And those types of reactions that we see are very consistent, honestly, with the research and information that I saw prior to the release of the vaccine being rolled out, and marketed to the people. And I will say that we've got family friends, we've got neighbors, we have children that we know that have myocarditis now. We have
Mm.
seen people have blood clots. I know personally multiple individuals that have had allergic reactions to the shot, and to the point of being put in the ICU. I know people that got
Mm-hmm.
the shot and they went deaf in one ear, stopped being able to walk or talk. So, those are the personal examples that we can see in our own life. I know people that within 24 to 48 hours, they died. They literally just
Yeah.
died unexpectedly. So, where is that coming from? And why is it happening? And honestly, I think that we have all of the proof, all of the evidence, even prior to the release of the COVID shot, to show all these potential side effects that could happen and would
Yeah.
happen for some people. So, the animal studies? They actually, hopefully, people need to be aware of this. they actually did not do the animal studies before the release of the COVID shot. They actually skipped those animal trials because they weren't producing positive results good enough to pass the animal
Yeah.
trials before it made it to the general population. And why
There's nothing normal about how they handled this.
there's nothing normal about it. And why the animal studies are significant is because during, for the past, I would say 20 years, they have been testing and trying to get this mRNA technology to go forward. So Moderna, I read some reports directly from Moderna, and what's crazy is their own reports in like 2019, just before it was all brought to the public, showed that they couldn't get the animal studies to really work well in the trials they were doing within, for the past 20 years. And the types of things they saw that were warning signs and red flags that were causing investors to be concerned to even support this type of technology were things like enhanced disease, lung failure in the animals that were
Yeah.
being given this technology. They were seeing fatalities within the animal studies. There was an enhancement of the disease, which is, it's actually something that's been a very huge concern for the coronavirus, the family of coronaviruses, and why, having any kind of shot or vaccine could be problematic. Which an enhanced disease is essentially that people who or animals that that were given the shot and then were exposed to the wild version of the virus actually were worse off than had they not been inoculated. So, and the disease itself was enhanced, right? So there's all of these issues that I think people really need to be aware of. And
Yeah.
I mean, and even a practical thing, I saw a report in Europe, and this immunologist gave a report about just that there's toxic chemicals and toxicity and contaminants in the shots and the vials. And that was their concern. It wasn't even about the animal studies. It was about there were actual contaminants that were harmful and toxic to human beings. And so they reported on that. So these are the kinds of
Yeah.
things that are being withheld from people where they're not being made aware that, I mean, the list of reasons why, there could be adverse reactions is very, very long. So.
Yeah. And, just we'll pivot in just a moment from this, but I just want to say all conspiracies are not theories. And just because something is a conspiracy, it's very easy for those that have an agenda or they're uneducated or unwilling to think critically to say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Why are you talking about this? Well, I'm talking about this because I care about the people that I influence. I care about the people in my church. And I've noticed that there's still people in my world that are coming back and, asking, for help to be able to get a letter or statement from the church to get a waiver so they don't have to take the vaccine. So they haven't taken a step back from trying to force this and enforce this, even though there's been victories around the country, and recently one in New York that happened. I forget the details of that, but that's not necessarily occurring in the rest of the states. They've been little by little, but they've been isolated. And so the social pressure and social engineering to just accept without asking questions, without having open debate, and given the reality that the virus is not what they said it was. That's factual. It wasn't going to, wipe out, so much of planet Earth. There are people that it killed. I buried people very close to me that had gotten COVID, and along with their comorbidities, it took their life. One of them was my father. So people say, well, you're just saying. I'm well aware and completely understand that it does impact and affect people, but to pretend that it impacts everyone in the same. I'm a survivor. I felt moderately not well for about 24 hours, and then I was good. Children, it does not kill children. The stats are in that the reality is it just doesn't happen. And those are stats that you can find from all over the nation. Now you have to go a little further because your first few pages on Google are all going to be an algorithm to tell you other than that. But that's why it's so important that we think critically within this, because your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. And what you put in your body, how you eat, how you care for yourself. But we need to be considerate of the voices that we listen to because they determine our future and our destiny. And this particular issue, my mother-in-law has been in medical studies for, well, all the years that I've known her. And we've had plenty of discussions around this and, vaccine injuries and the things that are occurring, like any other thing like this that would be brought to market would have never made it to the market.
Never.
It would not have happened. And so I think we need to be intellectually honest and care about things. Why does a pastor care about these things? Well, because we should care about our spirit, soul, and body. We should care about freedom, which is God's idea. And we should care about our children because it's already having adverse effects. And it does, this over time, given with the boosters and all those things, has shown that now those, and this is actually on mainstream news outlets, that those who have the different boosters are more likely to get COVID because it weakens the immune system and so on. So even if you completely disagree with this podcast, you're like, I don't know about that. I just want to say, well, then you should know about it because it literally can determine the future of how long you live and the rest of your life and how you get to enjoy that life, not only from the adverse effects, but also from tyranny. I've heard it said that, I can't remember where the quote came from, but it was basically, tyranny is nowhere until you wake up one day and it's everywhere.
Oh,
and the reality is that's what we're seeing. Oh, it's nowhere. It's all your choice. They're even backtracking, many of the government officials. We didn't try to keep the schools closed. We weren't forcing everybody to do this, yet the propaganda was so incredibly strong within all that. So let's just pivot. We just got a few minutes left and talk about this because it's the same idea when it comes to transgenderism with children. Which again, they're being groomed to be confused. Children do not question or consider. They don't have issues related to their sexuality. They're not wondering whether or not they're trans or they might be the opposite sex. Kids are just kids. Those are ideas that are brought to them by adults, confused adults, many of them wicked and evil, from what we're talking about, that are intentionally confusing children and then trying to set in motion the legal protections for those groomers that are taking advantage of these kids. So let's talk about that for a few minutes.
Okay. Okay, so this one, and as we talk about this, I want to make sure that we're giving people information that helps them to actually take action about it too and know what their rights are, because I think that will help them solve the issue. So first of all, parents have rights that are protected under the Constitution. So at any point, if a school or any program is trying to remove parental rights, remove notification from you as a parent, from parents, and not keep them informed about what's happening with their child, that first of all, that violates the parents, not only violates their rights, but it violates the constitutional protected right that parent has under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. So parents need to be empowered to know that. So first. Secondly, this issue also, I think it impacts the First Amendment of the Constitution as well. And I want to explain that. And that's where, a lot of children, or teenagers especially, they're trying to force them to speak a certain way, that they have to address people with certain pronouns and they have to, take on this particular kind of speech. Well, what if that goes contrary to what that child is being, how that child's being raised, or their religious beliefs, or, some of those fundamental beliefs that they have in their home. And that's where, again, the First Amendment comes in to protect those families and those children so that they can't be forced or compelled to speak a certain way. So if a school is trying to say your child has to use these certain pronouns or else they'll be punished, then parents can know. They can send a letter to the school. They can invoke the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment and say, for us as our family, this is our sincerely held religious beliefs, and you cannot do this, and so they explain why or how. But that's one way parents can protect their kids in that type of environment. The next thing as well, and there's lawsuits to prove this, that it's illegal for schools to not notify parents if a
Yeah.
child is trying to change their name or gender at school. So it's illegal. They cannot do that. So don't let them do that. So I would say
Yeah.
some very important tips for parents. They need to ask the school the parent needs to see every survey a school is putting forward to their children, especially the teenagers, the middle school age and high schoolers. Then parents can ask to see the curriculum. They can
Yeah.
ask to see if there's anything called a support plan. Ask for support plans, ask for surveys. Any of these areas or places that the school districts are hiding the information that they're sending to the children, and they're creating, schools are creating questionnaires about sexuality and preferred names and gender that parents just are not aware of. But a parent can ask for that. So that's one thing we're trying to encourage parents to do. There's also a law that's a federal law called PPRA, and I can give you the information and the links so people know how to utilize this law. But what it is it's a law that allows parents to opt out. So if there's any curriculum that's being taught that's different from the core fundamentals, math, history, science, English, the very fundamental things that children need to be learning at school, instead of these ideas that are not part of a normal curriculum. Parents can request in writing to see that curriculum. And when they do that, they can invoke this particular law, PPRA, and they can ask for the curriculum. A parent can opt out of the curriculum. So when I say curriculum, I'm talking about these surveys,
Yeah.
these extreme sex ed classes that are not teaching medically accurate information. And that's another thing to empower parents. Most laws, so in California, I'm going to give you a quick example here. In California, there's a law that was passed that required schools to essentially teach, sex ed. Okay. But within that law, the sex ed curriculum is supposed to be medically accurate, age appropriate, and not bias. Had not have a bias. So we filed a lawsuit to challenge some of the curriculum being taught in California at the schools, because we know it's not medically accurate, it's not age appropriate, and there is a bias to
Yeah.
being taught. So for other people in other states, they can look into the sex ed laws in their state and see if there's something similar to California where it's required for it to be medically accurate. So these are other areas people can be empowered. Another thing I would say on this, another parental tip, if there's a school that's trying to allow biological males to be allowed in the females' bathroom or locker rooms or vice versa, parents can actually request the school to provide a different locker room for their child, or a different bathroom, a private bathroom, a private locker room. So just so parents know, they don't have to just go along with it. So that's one
Yeah.
tip for them to know. And then the other thing too, I would say we have to have these conversations at home. So I really try to encourage people that the first line of defense is actually in the home. So the children, teenagers, they are being bombarded everywhere on this issue, in music, in media, in movies, everywhere at
Mm-hmm.
school. So
Mm-hmm.
for us as parents or grandparents or, faith leaders, pastors like yourself, parents need to have this conversation in the home with their kids, where they're opening the door for their children to come home and ask your kids questions like, have you filled out any surveys today? Tell me what you learned in class today. Tell me how you're feeling. Are any of these issues happening? Are you comfortable at school? Do you feel safe? And this is where it really starts, is in the home, honestly. And then making sure children, honestly, the social media is such a place where these groomers and people that are trying to prey on our children, it's very serious what happens on social media, where a child, a teenager who is trying to figure out who they are, and they're going through just, the normal self-conscious, insecure moments that we've all had as we were growing up in that stage of life. They're going online, and the algorithms for YouTube and all the different social media platforms are targeting the children on this issue. So they're feeding the kids, quick videos and links that aren't even what the children are searching for. So they can be very innocently looking up, some video or some, music that they want to listen to. And yet the algorithms are providing this information that we don't want them to have without the children even trying to look for it. So parents need to know that. And that also in the chat rooms, the private chat rooms, that's where sometimes affirming, quote unquote, affirming happens, where if a child is confused or having issues, or, for whatever reason is struggling with this, then parents need to know that that's where things can be happening, where it's confirming or affirming a child, and the parents may not be aware of it for, many, many months. So I would say parents need to really, really be monitoring social media, be paying attention to that, have these conversations in their home with their kids, make sure the door is wide open. And then also know our rights as parents when it comes to the schools. And I'll tell you one other thing too. This is being upheld in the courts in our favor on this issue. There was a recent ruling by a judge in San Diego in California where he did uphold parental rights and said that it was unlawful or illegal for a parent to not be notified if their child wanted to change their name or gender at school. So that's good. Like, we want that to be upheld in the court, so people have legal rights.
Yeah.
And then
that's really good.
The other thing a parent can do too is they can request for their school district to pass a resolution that basically they can pass a parental rights or parental notification resolution, or policy. So these are the kinds of things they can, people can do that across the state, where they're making sure their district or their city or their county are passing laws, ordinances, resolutions, policies that are protective of the children, and how this process can be put in place to protect parental rights. So I know there's so much we could talk about on this one. But
yeah, no, that's really good. So I just want to bring it together. I'll give you kind of some closing directives, how people can get more information in just a moment. But I just want to say, for those that are taking the time to listen to this, these are the hard things. They're not the feel good and I feel so encouraged necessarily, or you're just thinking about the easy lessons, because this goes to the core of our lives, where we realize, okay, we can't just go along to get along. And oftentimes, I think what happens is we say, we go to this place, or people have a tendency to go to this place. Well, that's not in our schools, or that's not, and it actually is from the federal government, by the way. And it happened with the bathroom issue under Barack Obama many years ago. We just weren't aware of that as parents, and it's continued to march forward. The reality is we do have a voice, but we have to use the voice. And if we don't use it, then we really do lose it in that sense. And I just would encourage everyone to say, what can I do? There's a lot of good organizations I know in our state. There's a number of good organizations. One of them is pafamily.org that we get a lot of information from, that does a lot of excellent promotion and awareness. But each of us has a part to play. And as you said, it does begin at home. I'll just share this one quick thought, and then I'll let you do the closing. I recently took my son for his well checkup, 16 years of age. My wife still likes to do the yearly checkups. I'm more of a contrarian. I'm like, it's whatever. Totally unnecessary, but we'll do it. And so we went so they could say, yeah, you look good and everything's, obviously what you know. But when we went in, nice doctor. And this is where we need to think about these things intelligently, because when we bring criticism to the schools, teachers and everybody, my mom was, everybody gets offended as if we're talking that everyone's bad. The reality is everybody's not bad, but there are negative things that are happening. All doctors aren't bad. Of course, they do amazing work, but there are bad ideologies. There are bad doctors or systems. And one of those was, they do a little survey similar to social emotional learning and SEL that's in all the schools that they do for data mining your children so they can ultimately teach and manipulate in ways that go contrary to your values. They asked me to leave the room. And I had already told my son, like, if you want to have fun with them, I'll leave the room because he's older. And he's like, no. And I said, no, I'm not leaving the room, but you can go ahead and ask the questions. And as soon as they realized I was not leaving the room, and I saw some of the questions, they were all gender related and the intentional grooming, sexually confusing, seeds of doubt where it doesn't need to be. They removed it from the screen and said, no, we'll just go on. And that's happening. I get people send these to me, all different ages. And I just want to let you know that God has, from a biblical standpoint, God has made you the authority of your home. Steward it well. Your children are the Lord's, they're yours, and don't go along to get along. We are living through a global cultural revolution. Whether people accept it or not, whether people think I'm extreme or not, it doesn't matter. The reality is it's happening on all fronts. And we don't have to give up and we don't have to quit. We can learn from people like Amy and others that are in the fight. We can get information, and then those little things can make a big difference. So, Amy, I'll let you bring it all together as we close.
Well, I want to say first, thank you for having this conversation with me and allowing me to, to come on and be able to share some of the things that we're concerned about and the things that we're working on and the things that we're passionate about here in California. And I'm also, just as we're wrapping it up, it's so important for people to realize that every action they do take does have an impact for good, especially when it comes to these big issues where we need everybody engaged. The children need us right now, not just your own children, which obviously it starts there, but the children of this great country, they need the warrior moms and dads and uncles and aunts and grandparents and pastors. And from just a faith perspective, I really, really hope that the faith community realizes that this actually is a responsibility for us to protect the children. If we're not going to do that, and if we don't stand up, then who is? Are we going to just let the schools take over as if they're the authority? Are we going to let the government pass laws that harm our sacred relationship with our babies and our children? It's only up to us to stand between them and our kids, and we're the only ones that can do that. So I know sometimes people don't do something or don't take action because they don't think it'll make a difference. And I'm here to say that it does make a difference. 1 + 1 + 1 is synergy and strategy. So getting engaged and involved with whatever the local parent groups or freedom groups or, your church and community, that does make a difference. Every action does do something. And then also silence is an action. So if people aren't saying something or they're not speaking up because they're afraid of the stigma attached to any of the issues that we've already talked about, I want to encourage people to not be fearful, but to have courage, because courage is contagious. And being in that space to say something and to speak up actually is an action. And I want people to, realize that truth always prevails. It always does, but it's a matter of how long it will take. So I think that people hearing how, we're winning in California, I hope they understand that if we can win here and have such huge results here and parents and people are coming together, you can win in any state, anywhere in this country.
Yes.
And the fight is worth it. Our children are worth it. Our values and protecting our freedom and the great, values of the Constitution, it's worth it. Like we can't we can't be the ones to say that this is happening on our watch and we decided to turn our back and give up because it was hard.
Yeah.
You know, it's up to us. It's happening in our time. It's our generation's issue. And so I just want to make sure people know that there are resources, there's ways to do this, and we are winning. There are results happening across the country. And I just think that, just people, hopefully they realize, that it's worth everything to fight this fight and to be involved. And so I'm just really grateful. Grateful for you to, be doing this, for the work that you guys are doing in Pennsylvania and the work you're doing with other, influencers and pastors. It's so important. Honestly, the faith community, if the whole faith community would actually engage on these issues, we would win overnight. Right?
Absolutely.
And so I don't want people to be afraid, because this is our responsibility. So I'm willing to come out and speak at your church. I just want people to hear what's happening and know that they can do something about it. So
yeah,
I'm very
good.
passionate about it.
So how can people find you and your organization online and maybe get some more resources?
Yes. So our website is www.perk-group.com. That's our website. We have a ton of resources on there, opt-out letters, just guidance for parents on these issues, medical freedom and parental rights. And then also on our social media, we have a Twitter and Instagram, at least for right now. They've censored us a lot, but it's PERK. Let's see, it's _PERK-group. So you can, we're on Instagram and Twitter to help people.
Amy, it was a great, spicy conversation. I think you just helped me get another strike on YouTube.
Oh, no.
I want to thank everybody for listening in. Share it with people. And everybody just make a decision that you're just going to take action as the Spirit of God leads you on these important matters. Amy, thanks for fighting the good fight. Appreciate it so much. Check more information out online. And again, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Sam. It was very nice to talk with you today. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I hope this message has inspired you to courageously stand up, speak up, and to live out your faith. If you like what you heard today, give me a 5-star review, follow the Courage Over Cowardice podcast, and share it with others to learn how to stand for truth in the midst of culture.